I remember that Friday night so clearly it almost feels like it happened yesterday. Amanda was sitting at the edge of the couch, one leg tucked under the other, scrolling through her phone like she was reading the most important news of her life. The TV was playing some show neither of us really watched anymore, just background noise filling the space between us. I was standing there, a couple of steps behind her, clutching a grocery bag with takeout I'd picked up on the way home. I don't even know why I bothered anymore. I guess I still hoped that maybe food would be the thing that reminded her we used to laugh together over cheap tacos. I cleared my throat. She didn't look up. I said, "Hey, you want to eat together tonight?" Her thumb kept sliding over the screen. She sighed, not loud, but just enough that I heard it. Like even answering me cost her more energy than she could spare. She turned her head a fraction, her eyes still locked on her phone, and mumbled, "I'm not hungry. I already had something." That was it. Not even a thanks or a sorry. Just that flat, indifferent dismissal. I looked at the spot on the couch next to her, the place I used to sit when we'd watch reruns and she'd fall asleep with her head on my chest. I felt something break in me, something I didn't even know was still holding on. I set the bag down on the kitchen counter and just stood there, my hands gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. All I could think was, this is it. This is the moment I finally accept she doesn't give a damn anymore. She glanced over, finally meeting my eyes for a split second, and her expression was like she was looking through me, like I wasn't even in the room. And that was the last time I tried to pretend we could fix any of it. But I guess to really understand how it came to this, you'd have to go back 7 years, when I thought marrying Amanda would be the best decision I ever made. Back then, everything felt alive. She was the kind of woman who'd show up at my construction sites with 2 thermoses of coffee and a grin that made the other guys elbow me and mutter about how lucky I was. I'd come home from 12 hours of wrangling permits and subcontractors to find her blasting old country records, dancing barefoot on the cold kitchen tiles with pizza boxes open on the counter. I was 32 when we got married. She was 27, working as a dental hygienist. I remember thinking she had the softest hands I'd ever felt when she'd rest her palm on my cheek or slip her fingers into mine. There was a time when she'd text me in the middle of the day just to say she missed me. Not because she needed something, but because she genuinely wanted to hear my voice. That first year, everything was easy. I'd get up at 6, shower, pull on my work boots, and she'd be in the kitchen packing my lunch. She'd kiss me goodbye with her hair still damp from the shower, and I'd drive to the job sites feeling like the luckiest bastard in Colorado. But life has a way of dulling the edges on things that used to shine. Maybe it started when I took the promotion to project coordinator. The hours got longer. The responsibilities piled up. She said she understood, but little things started changing. The texts got shorter. The laughter at night got quieter. She started going to bed before me, claiming she was tired. I told myself it was normal, that marriages go through phases. When her sister Haley moved in after her breakup, I actually thought it might shake Amanda out of the funk she'd been in. Haley was 6 years younger, more open, more talkative. She came to stay with us until she could figure out where to go next. I didn't mind. I'd always liked Haley. She had this gentle way about her, nothing like the brittle, impatient tone Amanda had started using with me. At first, the 3 of us would sit around the living room, talking about nothing. Work stories, stupid YouTube videos, the way the dog would steal socks and hide them under the coffee table. For a while, I thought maybe Amanda was softening. She laughed a little more with Haley around. But that was short-lived. I remember one night coming home later than usual. It was raining, and I tracked mud across the kitchen tiles without noticing. Amanda came around the corner, her face tight with irritation. "You can't be bothered to take your boots off?" "Really?" she snapped. I looked down at the prints and shrugged. "It's just mud. I'll clean it up." "It's always something," she muttered. "You never think." That was how it went. Every little thing turned into proof that I was failing her somehow. I tried to keep up the small gestures. I'd leave notes in her car, buy her favorite wine, even fix the leaky faucet she kept complaining about. None of it made a dent. After a while, I stopped expecting anything back. Haley, though, she noticed. Not in a romantic way, but she saw me. Sometimes I'd be making coffee before dawn, and she'd come into the kitchen in her oversized sweatshirt, hair a mess, and just smile softly like she felt sorry for me. We'd talk in low voices so Amanda wouldn't wake up. "Rough day?" she'd ask. "Yeah, I'd say. But that's life." And she'd nod like she understood. It wasn't flirting. It wasn't an escape. It was just connection. The bare minimum of being acknowledged. I think the worst part was realizing I missed being missed. That feeling when someone looks at you and their whole face lights up. I hadn't seen that in Amanda's eyes for so long it felt like I was hallucinating when I caught glimpses of it in other people. Even strangers. A cashier at the grocery store, a neighbor waving. Anything felt better than her blank stare. One evening, after an especially brutal day at work dealing with a subcontractor who botched the drywall, I came home hoping for once, that Amanda might ask how my day was. Instead, she was in the bathroom with the door locked. I could hear her voice through the thin wood. She was laughing. I sat down on the edge of the bed and waited. She came out 15 minutes later, still holding her phone. She barely looked at me. I said, "I miss you." I don't know how else to say it. She sighed, finally set the phone down, and crossed her arms. "I can't pretend anymore," she said flatly. "I'm tired of trying." It was like the air went out of the room. I swallowed hard. What does that mean? It means I don't want to keep going through the motions. I don't feel it, and I'm not going to fake it for your sake. I nodded, but my throat burned. You could have told me sooner. I'm telling you now. That was all she offered. I lay awake half the night, listening to the rain tapping against the window, wondering if there was anything left to save. The next morning, I knew there wasn't. The morning after she said she was done pretending, I stood in the kitchen staring at the coffee maker like it might spit out some kind of answer. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak in the walls. Amanda was still asleep, or at least she hadn't come out of the bedroom. I wondered if she felt relief. If telling me the truth had finally lifted the weight she'd been carrying around. For me, it was different. I felt hollow, like I'd been holding up the walls of our life by myself, and now that I'd let go, the whole damn thing was about to cave in. I drank my coffee slowly, trying to convince myself that I could keep going, that if I just gave her space, maybe she'd come around. But it was like trying to hold on to smoke. No matter how tight I gripped, there was nothing solid left. A couple of hours later, Haley came down the stairs, dressed in jeans and an old band t-shirt. She looked at me, her eyebrows pulling together like she could see exactly how wrecked I was. "You okay?" she asked softly. I opened my mouth to lie, to say I was fine, but nothing came out. Instead, I just shrugged. She poured herself some coffee and sat across from me at the kitchen table. We didn't talk for a minute, just sat there in the heavy silence. Finally, she said, "I heard some of it last night. I'm sorry." I rubbed a hand over my face. "It's not your fault." "I know," she said, looking down into her cup. I hate seeing you like this." I wanted to tell her it would be okay, but I didn't even believe it myself. The weeks that followed were a blur of routine. I'd go to work, come home, and find Amanda exactly where I left her, on the couch with her phone or at the kitchen counter, staring into space. We barely spoke. When we did, it was about practical things, groceries, bills, whether the dog had been let out. One evening, I came home to find Amanda dressed up, makeup perfect, perfume so strong it hit me as soon as I walked through the door. "Going out?" I asked. She didn't bother to turn around. "Yeah, dinner with the girls." I nodded slowly. "Okay, have fun." No invitation for me to join. No explanation. She was already halfway out the door before I finished the sentence. I stood there for a long time after the door closed. Just me and the dog and the echo of her heels on the front step. That night, Haley was in the living room watching some documentary. I sat down on the other end of the couch, feeling like a guest in my own house. "You want to talk about it?" she asked, not looking away from the TV. I thought about it. About how I hadn't really talked to anyone about any of this. Not my coworkers, not my friends. I didn't want to be the guy complaining about his marriage. But Haley was different. She was part of it, in a way. She'd seen it up close. "Not really," I said finally. She nodded. "Okay. But if you change your mind." "Yeah." We sat there in silence. And somehow, that was better than being alone. One Friday, I came home to the sound of laughter spilling out from the kitchen. For a split second, my heart lifted. Maybe Amanda was in a good mood. Maybe we could have a real conversation. But when I stepped inside, I saw her and two of her friends sitting around the kitchen island, wine glasses in their hands. They were talking over each other, giggling like teenagers. Amanda looked up at me, her smile fading a little, but she didn't say anything. One of her friends, Melissa, I think, glanced at me and then leaned in closer to Amanda, lowering her voice just enough that she probably thought I wouldn't hear. "God, how do you stand it?" "He's so boring," she whispered. Amanda's eyes flicked to me and then back to Melissa. And then she laughed. A sharp, humorless little bark. "Yeah," she said. "It is what it is." I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked upstairs. I closed the bedroom door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor until my vision blurred. That laugh, it was like a knife. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that their voices faded and the house grew quiet again. When I finally went back down, they were gone. Amanda was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up when I grabbed my keys and walked out the front door. I didn't have a plan. I just drove. The streets were mostly empty, the sky heavy with clouds. I ended up parked by the lake on the west side of town, the one where Amanda and I used to go when we first started dating. Funny how places don't change, even when everything else does. I sat there with the engine idling, hands on the wheel, feeling like the loneliest man alive. After a while, my phone buzzed. A text from Haley. Hey, you okay? I didn't answer right away. But 10 minutes later, there was another. If you want company, I'm here. I hesitated, then typed back. I'm by the lake. Mind if I come sit with you? No. It's fine. 15 minutes later, her car pulled up beside mine. She got out, wrapped in a big gray sweater, and slid into the passenger seat without saying anything. We sat there in silence, watching the water ripple under the streetlights. After a long time, I said, she doesn't love me anymore. Haley turned to look at me, her expression so sad it almost broke me. I know, she said quietly. I'm sorry. I nodded. I guess I've known for a while. I just didn't want to admit it. She didn't try to argue, didn't offer empty reassurance, just sat there with me while the world kept turning outside the windshield. And somehow, that felt like the most honest moment I'd had in years. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling nothing. No anger, no desperation, just a cold clarity I hadn't had before. By 7 o'clock, I was online, looking at apartment listings. I didn't tell Amanda. Not yet. I started small, packing up the tools from the garage, some of my clothes, the box of old photos she hadn't touched in years. I moved them into a storage unit on my lunch breaks. It felt almost peaceful, like I was finally moving in a direction, any direction. And she didn't notice. Or if she did, she didn't ask. That told me everything I needed to know. A couple of weeks passed like that, me quietly taking pieces of my life out of the house while Amanda went on living as if I were a piece of old furniture she'd stopped noticing. Every morning, I'd wake up, shower, and get dressed in the walk-in closet we used to share. My clothes were thinning out on the rack, the empty hangers multiplying, but she never said a word. One evening, I came home to find her at the kitchen table with Haley. They were talking in low voices. As soon as I walked in, Amanda's face shut down, like she was flipping a switch. Haley glanced at me, her eyes lingering on my half-packed duffel bag. Hey, she said gently. Hey, I muttered. Amanda didn't even look up, just kept scrolling through her phone, her mouth set in that same tight line I'd gotten used to. I went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my own hands. I couldn't figure out how we'd gone from dancing in the kitchen to this. Two strangers occupying the same space. That night, I lay awake listening to her moving around downstairs. Every footstep sounded like a reminder, this isn't your home anymore. The next morning, she left early. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at her empty coffee mug. Haley came down a few minutes later. She stopped when she saw me, like she was trying to decide whether to say something. You're really leaving, she said finally. I nodded. Yeah. She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. For a long time, we didn't speak. I don't think she realizes it yet, Haley said softly. She doesn't care, I said. Or she does, but not enough. Haley looked at me like she wanted to argue, but then she just sighed. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. It's not your fault. She reached across the table and rested her hand on mine. Just for a second. A small gesture that reminded me I was still human. Later that day, I called a realtor about an apartment I'd seen online, a little two-bedroom in an older building on the south side of town. Nothing fancy, but it felt like somewhere I could breathe. When I walked through it, the place smelled faintly of fresh paint and cheap carpet cleaner. The windows rattled when the wind picked up, but it was mine, or it would be. I signed the lease that afternoon. That night, I didn't tell Amanda. I didn't see the point. She was already in her own world. I spent the evening packing more boxes, tools, winter coats, a couple of framed photos of my parents. I left our wedding picture where it was. I didn't feel anything looking at it, just a dull recognition that it belonged to a different version of us. Around midnight, I climbed into bed. She was still awake beside me, the blue glow of her phone lighting her face. I closed my eyes and wondered if she even noticed the shape of my body beside hers anymore. 2 days later, I started moving my stuff into the new apartment. A few boxes at a time. Haley was the only one who seemed to care. She'd catch my eye when I carried a box out the front door, her expression a mixture of sadness and relief. One afternoon, she stopped me on the front porch. Jason, she said quietly, are you sure you don't want to tell her? I looked past her, toward the living room window where Amanda was sitting, oblivious. What difference would it make? I asked. Haley didn't answer. The last Friday I spent in that house was the night everything finally snapped into place. Amanda had her friends over again. I got home late, traffic was bad on the interstate, and I'd had to stop by the storage unit to drop off another load. I walked into the kitchen, tired and hungry, and there they were, Amanda and Melissa and a couple of others. Wine bottles on the counter, laughter too loud, that brittle edge to their voices. I set my keys down and nodded in their direction. No one said hi. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, trying to decide whether to grab something to eat or just go to bed. That's when Melissa glanced at me, her lips curling into a smirk. He looks exhausted, she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. Poor thing. Must be hard, being so predictable. Amanda didn't even pretend to be embarrassed. She laughed, A high, thin laugh that made my stomach clench. Yeah, she said. It is. She didn't look at me when she said it. I didn't say a word. I just walked out of the kitchen, grabbed my jacket, and left. I spent that night in my truck, parked in the lot behind my new building. The seats were uncomfortable, and the cold seeped into my bones, but I felt calmer than I had in months. In the morning, I drove back to the house. Amanda was still asleep. I packed the last of my clothes, the tools I'd left in the garage, a few books. I set my keys on the kitchen counter. I stood there for a long minute, looking around the place where I'd thought I'd build a life. Then I walked out the door. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. At 9 o'clock that morning, I sent her a message. I'll come by later to pick up the rest. Take care. An hour later, my phone lit up with her name. I let it ring. When the texts started coming, one after another, I turned the phone over and left it face down on the passenger seat. By the time I went back for the final boxes, she was waiting, standing in the living room with her arms folded tight across her chest. So that's it, she demanded. You're just walking away? I didn't look at her as I picked up the last box. No, I said quietly. I'm just finally catching up. Her voice broke. You're giving up. I met her eyes, and for once, I didn't feel anything. You gave up a long time ago, I said. I'm just done pretending I didn't notice. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something else, but no words came out. I walked out without looking back. The first night in the new apartment felt strange in a way I can't really explain. It wasn't relief, exactly. More like a quiet emptiness. The walls were bare, the air smelled like fresh paint and old dust, and every time the heat kicked on, it rattled the vents loud enough to make me jump. But it was mine. I dropped my duffel bag in the bedroom and just stood there, listening to the silence. No footsteps upstairs, no glow of Amanda's phone in the dark. For a while, I thought maybe I'd start to feel something, grief, regret, a sudden panic that I'd made a mistake. But it didn't come. I lay down on the mattress I'd bought secondhand and stared up at the ceiling until the sun started to come through the blinds. The next morning, I made coffee in the cheap little drip machine I'd picked up at the hardware store. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and floor cleaner. I drank my coffee, standing by the window, watching the snow fall on the street below. No one knew I'd left yet except Amanda and Haley. Not my parents, not my friends. I didn't feel ready to explain it to anyone. A couple days later, I was back at work, trying to focus on a site schedule that refused to make sense. The guys noticed something was different. You okay, man? Mark, one of my crew leads, asked. I shrugged. Yeah, just moving. Moving out. Yeah. He didn't ask more, just nodded like he got it. After work, I drive home to my empty apartment and sit on the floor with a beer, feeling the quiet settle into my bones. Funny how you can get used to almost anything. About a week later, the messages from Amanda started to change. At first, she'd sounded angry, like I'd done something unforgivable by leaving without a big final confrontation. Then the tone shifted. I don't understand why you won't talk to me. We can fix this if you just come home. I miss you. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I read every message but didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. One evening, she showed up at my work. I was in the trailer, going over invoices, when someone knocked. I looked up, and there she was, hair pulled back, eyes wide and desperate in a way I hadn't seen in years. Can we talk? She asked. I stood up slowly. Amanda, this isn't the place. Please. Her voice cracked. I don't know what to do. I sighed. You should go home. She blinked, like she couldn't process it. You're really done, she whispered. I am. She stood there another few seconds. Then she turned and walked away, her shoulders hunched like she was carrying something heavy. I watched her go, and for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to run after her. Haley texted me later that night. She came home crying. I just thought you should know. Thanks, I wrote back. I didn't ask for more details. I didn't need them. Life settled into a new rhythm. I'd get up before dawn, make coffee, drive to work. After hours, I'd stop by the grocery store or pick up takeout from the diner near the highway. Some nights, I'd sit by the window with a beer, looking out over the parking lot, wondering how long it would take for the old version of me to fade. Most days, it was easier than I expected. About a month after I moved out, I went to a birthday party for my buddy Nate. He'd been nagging me to show up for weeks, saying I needed to get out of my own head. I didn't feel like going, but I showed up anyway, carrying a six-pack and an awkward smile. The place was packed. Old friends, co-workers, people I barely recognized. Music thumped in the background, and the kitchen smelled like barbecue and cheap beer. I was halfway through my second drink when Nate came up and clapped me on the shoulder. Glad you made it, he said. Yeah, me too, I guess. He grinned. Someone here I want you to meet. Before I could argue, he steered me toward the living room. That's when I saw her. Riley. She was standing by the window, holding a plastic cup, talking to a woman I didn't know. Her hair was dark, cut short around her jawline, and when she smiled, it lit up her whole face. Nate nudged me. Be nice, he whispered. She's good people. I almost rolled my eyes. I wasn't ready for anything new. But when she turned and caught me watching, she smiled. This warm, open expression that felt like an invitation. I walked over, introduced myself, and somehow the conversation was easy. She asked questions, actually listened to my answers. She laughed at my stupid work stories, and when I admitted I'd just moved out after 7 years of marriage, she didn't flinch or look uncomfortable. I'm sorry, she said, her voice low and sincere. That must have been hard. It was, I said. But it was time. She nodded, like she understood exactly what I meant. We talked for the rest of the night. When I finally said goodbye, she touched my arm. Hey, she said. If you ever want to grab coffee or something, let me know. I walked out into the cold with her number in my phone, feeling something I hadn't in a long time, a flicker of hope. Amanda must have heard about the party. Maybe from mutual friends, maybe from Haley. A week later, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door, and there she was, hair messy, eyes rimmed red. I don't know how to do this, she said. I didn't answer. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Do you hate me? She asked. I shook my head. No. Then why won't you talk to me? Because there's nothing left to say. She rubbed a hand over her face. I don't know. I thought you'd always be there. That no matter how bad things got, you'd stay. I looked at her for a long moment. That's exactly why I had to leave, I said quietly. She sank down onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. I watched her shoulders shake, but I didn't move to comfort her. I couldn't. We sat in silence until she finally stood up and walked to the door. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know, I said. Then she was gone. A few months passed after that last visit. The text slowed down. The call stopped. Eventually, the silence settled between us like something permanent. I didn't rush into anything with Riley. We started slow, coffee after work, a movie on the weekends. She never pushed me to talk about Amanda, but when I did, she listened without judgment. There was one night, a cold evening in March, when we sat in her kitchen eating Chinese takeout from paper boxes. She looked at me over the rim of her glass and said, You know, you're allowed to be angry. I thought about that, about how I hadn't let myself feel much of anything. Anger, sadness, resentment. Just a dull acceptance that this was the way it had to be. I'm not sure anger would help, I said finally. Maybe not, she said. But sometimes you have to let yourself feel it so it doesn't eat you alive. I nodded, even if I wasn't sure I believed it. Life kept moving forward. The apartment started to feel more like a home. I hung some pictures on the walls, photos from hiking trips, a framed blueprint of one of my favorite projects. On weekends, I'd drive up into the mountains, park near a trailhead, and just walk until I felt tired enough to sleep. Little by little, the ache started to fade. One afternoon in late spring, I stopped by the grocery store after work. I was pushing a cart down the bread aisle when I saw her. Amanda. She looked different, thinner, her hair pulled back in a messy knot, dark circles under her eyes. She was holding a loaf of bread in one hand and staring at the shelf like she'd forgotten what she was doing. When she turned and saw me, her face crumpled. For a second, I thought she might walk away, pretend she hadn't noticed me. But she didn't. She walked over, her steps hesitant. Hi, she said quietly. Hey. We stood there, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. You look good, she said. Her voice was brittle, like she was holding something back. Thanks. You okay? She swallowed hard. I don't know. I guess. I thought I would be by now. I didn't say anything. Just waited. She looked down at the floor. I miss what we had, and I know I'm the one who ruined it. I didn't argue. She went on, her voice shaking. The people I've been seeing, it's not the same. They expect me to be grateful for every little thing. Like it's a favor to get any kindness at all. She looked up then, her eyes wet. You never made me feel like I had to earn it. I nodded slowly. I loved you. That's what you do when you love someone. A tear slid down her cheek, and she wiped it away with the back of her hand. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know what I was throwing away. I believed her, but it didn't change anything. I know, I said gently, but it's too late. She took a shaky breath. If I could go back. I shook my head. It wouldn't matter. I'm not the same person anymore. For a moment, she just looked at me, like she was trying to memorize my face. Then she nodded. I hope you're happy, she said. I am, I said. And I meant it. She walked away, and I watched her go, feeling, not relief, exactly, just a quiet certainty that I'd done the only thing I could. That night, I told Riley about it. She seemed lost, I said. Riley reached across the couch and took my hand. That's not your burden to carry. I know. She rested her head on my shoulder. You did everything you could. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I think I'm finally okay, I said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Sometimes I still think about the way Amanda laughed when she was happy, the way she used to dance in the kitchen, the way she'd fall asleep with her head on my chest. But those memories don't hurt anymore. They're just what they are, pieces of a life that ended. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can love someone with everything you have and still have to walk away. Not because you stopped caring, but because they stopped caring first. And when that happens, the only thing left to do is start over.